Hello, welcome to Rosal Reads. I'm Deja, and today we are going to do a recent reads. I have quite a lot of books to talk about today because I participated in the amazing Readathon in June, so I have 21 books to talk about. I'm going to try to keep this brief, but if there's a certain book that you are wanting to hear about, I will leave timestamps down below so you can jump around as you see need. But without further ado, let's get into this video. The first one that I have is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved the Demon, and I was pleasantly surprised by how much I actually enjoyed this. I wasn't sure if the humor would work for me, but I ended up having a very good time with this one. I was just enjoying the adventure of following Cinnamon with this demon who has to take down the witch that kind of cursed all of the demons. And so you're following these two characters as they are doing that, and then along the way they fall in love with each other. Like I said, I really did enjoy this one. It wasn't quite a 5-star read for me. I did find the plot a little bit lacking sometimes, and I saw some scenes where the romance seemed to be building, but otherwise, just because of the demon being like a different species, just the way that they connected wasn't really like romantic to me. I still very much enjoyed it. It's just a light-hearted read that I would definitely recommend for people to try out if they are interested. The next one that I read was Savage City, and this would be my second or third book by Penelope. I have another book that I read later on by the same author, and this one I have very mixed thoughts about. I'm feeling like Penelope is not the author for me. I feel like there's always something about her books that I just do not like. In the Earthsinger Chronicles, which is the first one that I read by her, I read the first one in that series, and it was Song of Blood and Stone, and I was intrigued by the fantasy elements of it, but I did not think that the romance was done well. And in this one, I feel like it's kind of the same, only that this one was a better romance, but I don't think I like the fantasy elements of it. In this book, you have a character that wakes up in a different world, and they think that she's this princess. And in this world that she wakes up in, they have animal familiars, and so they can sometimes like shift into them, I think. And I don't know, it was just like a weird thing to me. Like, I'm not really called to that in the first place, but I wanted to give this a try. And I think because I was not very invested in just the animal familiar thing, that kind of like put me off from the story. But then also it's kind of like a dystopian society. Like, I think it's taking place in a dystopian California. And I think for me, I was kind of just not confused, but just not really understanding how they got from like the modern day California that we're in to like this kingdom with these animal familiars. But I don't know if it was supposed to be like a direct parallel or not. I think it was honestly supposed to be like a separate realm, and I don't know, that just kind of confused me. So I wasn't really invested in this world. And then like the romance, it was not necessarily slow burn, but I feel like the same thing that happened with the Earthsinger Chronicles, it just felt like it was like a switch. I feel like there was a little bit more of a build up in this one, but not quite as much that I would call it a romance in terms of making this like a fantasy or dystopian romance. So this one was kind of disappointing. Just like in the Earthsinger Chronicles, I'm very curious to see where the second book in this series leads, but I don't know if I'm actually going to pick it up because every book that I've read by this author has not been the best, even though it has potential. So I'll leave that as it is. The next one that I have is A Ruin of Shadows. This is a novella, and this one I thoroughly enjoyed. Like, this one lives in my head rent-free. It's my favorite assassin story, and I just wish that this author wrote more. In this short novella, you're following this skilled assassin, and she is kind of getting older, and she has this mask that she wears, and it gives her these protective powers and stuff. She works for the kingdom, but there's like this tension between her and this order that she's given by the kingdom, and the story goes on from there. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Like I said, I really liked the world that this was in. It's not really a unique world, but I think I just really liked the character being in this world. And there was like this interesting side character that I was really attached to, and I just really liked how she came in at the end. And yeah, I just really liked her. Like, this character really is like a badass character, and so is like her side character. So I really wish that this was like a longer one, and I don't want to give too much background on it or anything like that because it is a novella. So I definitely recommend reading it, and I'm really hoping that the author writes a full-length novel someday. I think the author mainly focuses on short stories though, so I don't know. We will see if I actually get my wish. The next one I have is Never Cross a Highlander, and this one was definitely a pleasant surprise. This is a Highlander romance, which I don't think I've ever read one before, but this one follows two characters. You have Elsa, who was basically enslaved even though she was a free woman, and so she's trying to run away from this castle that she's enslaved in just to get back to her people. And then you have Callum, who is the kind of Harriet Tubman of the time. Like, he helps enslaved people get free and go live free lives. That aspect of it was very like interesting to me. I also just really liked the dynamic between Elsa and Callum. Callum is my new book boyfriend. I love him so much. Like, I just really loved that the author did not shy away from them actually being Black during this time. Like, it wasn't like a colorblind society, but it also wasn't like heavy-handed on the racism, and especially wasn't heavy-handed with the racism between the couple, which is why I usually cannot stand interracial romances in historical settings, but that's neither here nor there because this one did not have that. I also really like that they are very tied to their African ancestry. They call Elsa a witch because she practices sometimes the African herbalism. Elsa is actually biracial, so her father was white and her mother was like an African woman, and so she's looked down upon that. But I really like the story. I would give it, I think, like a 4.5 star. Sometimes I did get annoyed with Elsa, but I think it's not because of her character. I'm just really tired of seeing like the same headstrong female characters, and I don't know, she just wasn't interesting to me. She just read like every other heroine in a historical fiction to me. But Callum, I really liked what he was doing in terms of helping enslaved people, and I also just really liked his touch her or die energy. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I'm looking forward to the next one in the series. The author released something else, but I'm hoping that she'll come back to this one because yeah, I really like this one. The next one that I have is Sing Me to Sleep by Gabi Burton. This was on my anticipated releases for 2023, and I'm just now getting around to it. I have mixed thoughts about it. I think it's a 4-star read for me, or maybe like iffy, because I could not get over the fact that you had this 17-year-old girl that was a siren, and the author does not go into too much depth with like her seducing them, but I just cannot get over the fact that she had a 17-year-old Black girl seducing grown men for information or to lead them to their death. I would have preferred this in an adult setting, and I did not like those scenes. Those scenes made me uncomfortable, and it wasn't like it was like a sexually seductive kind of thing. I mean, sometimes I feel like it was, like, especially for like the older men, but it just felt so creepy to me. It was so cringy, and I did not like that at all. But other than that, I thought the story was strong. I'm very curious to see about the second book, which I have an arc of, so I'm going to be getting to that one soon. But I was very interested in this world. I like the politics of it, and I have mixed thoughts about the little romance that was building between it, but I didn't hate it, and I still wish that this was like an adult book because the romance could have been even better, but that's okay. I'm hoping the seductive aspects are not in the second one, but she's a siren, so I'm assuming that's going to happen anyway. But the way that the book left off has made me curious to see where the story is going to go, so I will be reading that one soon. The next one that I read is Elatsoe, and I did not like this one this much. I was listening to this one on an audiobook, and maybe that was like my reasoning for not liking it that much because the narrator is very young, And I knew going into this that people were saying that this read very young. And I don't know if that took away from my enjoyment of it, but I don't know. I just feel like sometimes there was like tangents going on and I just couldn't get invested in the mystery of what happened to her cousin that much, because at the end of the day this was supposed to be like a mystery kind of book with magical elements that is inspired by the author's indigenous heritage. And I don't know, I just cannot vibe with the voice of the character. Sometimes I feel like the mystery got lost in the middle of like a lot of tangents, just random things that I feel like was happening. And then I feel like there wasn't actually any mystery or suspense elements of this, because really what she's trying to do is not figure out who killed her cousin. It's just to prove that the person who did it actually did it. And I was just not really invested in that. Unfortunately, I'm probably going to give this one like a 3-star just because I liked some elements of it. I really liked the indigenous like magical element of it. But yeah, everything else I was not really a fan of. And then I read Naomi season 1. This is a comic / graphic novel, and this one is following a girl who's basically just trying to figure out the origin of her birth, and it goes from there. I like the art in this one and I like the story. I feel like this is just a beginning part to the rest of the story though, because it wasn't really like a complete story to me. But it was a good start and I'm curious to see about the season 2 part of it. But overall, I thought it was fine. I think I would have stronger opinions for the next one once the story actually gets started, because this one, like I said, is really just her figuring out like her backstory. The next one that I have is one that has been getting very mixed reviews, and this book is Blood at the Root. I did not love this one and I did not hate this one. Honestly, if I was not participating in the Amazing Readathon, I most likely would have DNF'd this in the first 50 pages. But I'm actually happy that I did not DNF it when I did, because the later half of the story I feel like was stronger than the beginning. The beginning felt very clunky to me and it just felt like it needed like a little bit more revisions in it, because I feel like it was just like a lot of like backstory for one, and then there were so many millennial like pop culture references, which was very aggravating. I'm glad that those basically went away towards like the end. They weren't as heavy-handed and it almost felt like he was trying to do like black pop culture elements that just read very like, oh, I'm like super black, but I was like, it just didn't feel authentic to me. But I just didn't like the pop culture references at all. I hate pop culture references in my books pretty much all the time, so that I already knew was going to take down a star for me. The other part of this book that I did not really like was the magic elements of this. I cannot speak for the hoodoo voodoo elements of it because I don't practice it, and I think part of the problem that I had with it is because this is an actual practice for people that the author just kind of made up its own thing, but I don't really know why he's tied it to hoodoo voodoo elements. I feel like he only did that because it's a part of black history and black culture, but you can definitely tell that it's not like a culture or a practice that he does, or maybe even like researched heavily about, because some of the magic just did not make sense to me. Like, it just didn't really have rules, and I think that's the main problem with it. This magic system read as if it's supposed to have rules, and the way that this author presents the magic, it doesn't seem like there are rules. Like the main character Malik, he is literally doing whatever magic that the plot pretty much needs for it to happen, but in other instances you have the other characters talking about consequences of using the magic in a certain way, or just all these other things. And so I wasn't really sure if this was supposed to be a soft magic system or if it was supposed to be a hard magic system. And I just don't think that it was fleshed out at all. And while I appreciate that it was trying to add all of these like elements of a Black American culture and the magic that is present in Black American culture, I just really don't think that it was done well enough for him to execute it. I think he should have just made up his own thing like it seems like he was doing in the first place. But other than that, I did not mind reading the story. It's not a favorite. I'm most likely not going to read the next one, but I did not think this was a bad book. It just read like an average YA book to me. There's a lot of criticisms talking about how it's sexist. I did not really think it was sexist, but I could be like wrong if people can point out passages to me, but I think a lot of the passages that people are talking about, they're missing a lot of the cultural nuances. Like, of course, I, as an adult woman, did not want to read from the perspective of a teenage boy being twerked on. That's not at all what I wanted to read. But is it authentic? Yes. I think Don't Fret Books said it the best, that Malik just really needed to grow up. And I completely agree with that. Malik really just needs to grow up. And I'm hoping that maybe in future books, the author will not necessarily correct some of the behavior, but I really wish that they had like a mentor figure that would just like correct some of those things, because at the end of the day, you do have teens reading this, and I don't really want it to come off that this was okay, I guess. So yeah, I mean, it was fine, but not a new favorite. The next one is an audiobook that I was listening to, and it's called I Want to Die, but I Want to Eat. Tteobokki, I believe that's how you pronounce it. I did not actually like this that much. I did not realize that it was going to be basically the therapy sessions of this author with her therapist, and I was not very interested in that. So if that does sound interesting to you, I guess try it out. But for me, if I was to rate a memoir, which I'm not, I think I would just give it like a 3-star. The next one I read is The Sun and the Void, and I really like this one. It's not quite a 4-star read for me because there was definitely problems that I had with it, but I'm very curious to read the next one, which is coming out in 2025. And this one is a Venezuelan-inspired fantasy world, and I am in need of a lot more of that in my life because I really like this world, and I could see some of the cultural influences that this author put in the book, and I just really loved it. I loved following the royals. I love following the two main characters, more so towards the end, because I do think that this book had a pacing problem. I was intrigued in the beginning, and then it slowed down, and then I was intrigued towards the end, and I'm just very curious to see where the story goes. What I love most about it, like I said, is the cultural influences that it had. And there was one character that is so terrible, but like I love to hate him. Like, I have never really had that feeling towards a character before, but I love to hate this character so much. And I'm excited to be back in this world and just see like where it goes. The next one that I have is A Raisin in the Sun. This one, I remember watching the movie and listening to the audiobook. It actually just read exactly like the movie did, and I think it's because this is actually a screenplay. And I appreciate this story. It's not a new favorite of mine, but I appreciate it for representing the struggles that a Black family had to go through. I think this is actually based off of the author's family, so I appreciated seeing this point in time for this particular family and just the struggles that they had to go through. And I'll leave it at that because I don't really have lots of thoughts about it. The next one that I have is another novella that is called She Who Hears All Whispers by DaVaun Sanders. This one was kind of a disappointment for me. I wasn't really expecting a lot from it, but I feel like I was expecting at least like a story I can enjoy, especially because I did like Ruin of Shadows. But for this one, I just thought it was kind of like average for me. I thought that the world was interesting, but in terms of like how it was executed, I felt like it was a little bit like clunky to me, and I don't think I really got what was happening until the end. It's a very action-packed kind of story, and I do typically like more character-driven stories, so that could be a factor in why I only thought it was like a average kind of read for me. But I thought the world was very interesting, and I'd be curious to see like if the author has a full-length novel in this one, because I thought it was just interesting. Like the world that this author created, it has like a matriarch that they say can hear pretty much everything that people are saying, and this matriarch is pretty much like a goddess to these people. But there's a woman who does not like this goddess because she refused to save her child. So it's kind of like a revenge story. And I'll just leave it at that because it is decent and I'm curious to try more by the author. But I think I just needed it executed a little bit differently so I wasn't like so confused in the beginning. But yeah, the next one that I have is Dreamer by MultiMind. This one was not good. Like, I think I would give this one like 1.5 stars, maybe 2 if I'm being generous. But yeah, this was not good. I thought this could be very interesting because it's following like dream magic, and there's like a ancestral part of the story that has the dream magic, but half of this could have been cut out because it was literally the character like meandering through the day. The other part of it was interesting, but I just feel like this was not a strong story at all. I'm still just a little bit confused on what the point of the story was. I really do think that this could have been a strong story, but yeah, it just was not executed well at all, and I was left very unsatisfied at the end. The next one is Last Light by Claire Kent. This is my first Claire Kent, and I only read it because it was on the list of host favorites, and that is from Heather at HEA Booktubes. And this one I liked in the beginning. It was giving me very atmospheric kind of vibes. Like, I felt like I was in this dystopian society, and I really enjoyed that. But as soon as the characters started being intimate with each other, I quickly lost interest. It felt like the story slowed down a lot after they started being intimate with each other, and it didn't really feel like they were actually building a relationship with each other. I mean, sometimes it did, but not really enough for me to feel like it was like romantic, that they would want to be together at the end. But I guess it was okay. But if it had literally kept going like the first half of the story was, then I would have been very interested. But yeah, it just lost me towards the end, and I thought it was like, and I thought that it had like very cute parts. Like, I really would have liked this a lot more if it had just like a little bit less of the sex scenes, and maybe a character that was not so intent on losing her virginity. But yeah, it was fine. I think I would give it maybe 3.5 stars. The next one that I read is Poems by my Angelou. This one was just a collection of short stories by the author, and I'm not a big poetry fan. My uncle gave me this book years ago, and I've never been called to pick it up, but I picked it up this month just to see if there was anything that I liked, and there were a few that I did like, but overall, like, I'm not a fan of poetry. I don't really vibe with it, and so this one I would give 3. Like, it was fine, but nothing memorable for me besides like the ones that are like Leslye, Rise, and like just her more popular ones. And then I have Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I did not like this one as much as I hoped. This was on my 5-star predictions, and this was definitely not a 5-star read. I was not vibing with the main character, and I just did not feel like there was enough tension in this story. I feel like there was supposed to be kind of tension with like a love triangle, but the romance was not built at all. You're just kind of supposed to just see that they got together after like 2 years, and like all of that like bonding that they did with the 2 love interests was pretty much off page. I also just feel like this was just kind of boring because the main character was pretty much good at everything. I mean, at first she wouldn't be good at anything, but then she would work hard at it and she would be good. And yeah, I was just bored. I was just so bored reading this, and I think it had interesting elements. Like, I love like gods and goddesses and like those kind of like magical elements, but yeah, because there wasn't really like a strong character for me to root for because you just knew she was gonna be fine, and because there wasn't really like any tension in like the plot or the romance or anything, I just found this one kind of boring. So that was a very big disappointment for me. And then I read Down Among the Sticks and Bones. This is the next book in the Wayward Children series, and I like this one. I was very much intrigued with the parents in the beginning and just like their reasoning and just the way that they did everything. And I thought the children were fine as well. You're following them over like a series of years as they go through a door that leads to this like Grim Reaper kind of place, and it has a vampire on one end and then like a mad scientist on the other. And one girl goes to the mad scientist and one girl goes to the vampire, and it's just their story of what happened while they were there and why they ended up coming back. I thought it was intriguing, not my favorite so far in the series, but I like the storytelling way that the author writes these stories, and so I'm very curious to see what I think about the next one. The other Penelope book that I read for this month was Daughter of the Merciful Deep. I received an arc of this in exchange for an honest review, and like I said earlier, I don't think Penelope is the author for me. I have mixed thoughts on this one as well. This one, I don't think the fantasy elements were done that well. I think it had pacing issues. I think the historical elements were very good. So I felt like the beginning was very slow, and then it picks up, and then it gets very slow again. And that was just actually kind of disappointing for me because the historical elements of this I really loved. Like, I really liked how much research went into this because you can tell that the author tries to make this town feel as authentic as possible. And it's based off of historical events where sometimes Black towns would be flooded or mauled over or something to make room for something for white people. And so I liked that historical aspect of it. But like I said, like I just feel like the fantasy elements weren't good. The main character herself, I mean, she was kind of interesting, but honestly, I just felt like she was kind of a special snowflake. Like, she was not that intriguing to me. I did like the romance in this one though. Probably because it wasn't really the main focus. Like, they had kind of like a friends to lovers type of thing, but I really did like it. But yeah, I just found this one very lacking. And I think it's because the beginning was not strong for me. And I was just like, when is the fantasy elements going to come in? And yeah, it just did not deliver what I wanted. I have 3 more to go. Almost done. So the next one that I have is Heavy as the Head, Love and War. This is a reread for me, and I really like the way that this author writes angst and like tension between characters. I have yet to really find a romance that really does that for me, and so I always go back to this author because I feel like this author does it well. The other aspects of the story, not necessarily the best in terms of the plot, the world building, the characters, not the strongest. I do think that they could have been better, especially in this first book. I could not stand the main character. I do not like Kella. She sounds very immature to me. Just with some like the world building elements, I wish that there was a little bit more dragons. The main character, Makai, is actually a dragon shifter, but you don't really see that in this book. And there's a little bit of political intrigue. I did like the villain in this one, but sometimes she just read kind of flat for me. Like, you could see her reasonings, but I don't know, she just seemed evil from the beginning, and I kind of like a morally gray villain that like you can kind of see their perspective. And not to say that I can't see her perspective, but I just feel like it could have been a little bit more morally gray, if that makes sense. But with all of the problems that I said, I still go back to the series because of the angst and the tension. Like, my heart like literally is pulled in so many directions when I read this book, because the main character Kella needs to get married because her family is basically being audited by the king, and the king's son is the person that she's falling in love with. There's a little bit of a love triangle, but not really, because like most love triangles, you can usually tell who they're gonna go with. But yeah, I read this one, I enjoyed it. I would probably give this one like 3.25 stars. It was good, but not like my favorite. I really like the next one, so hopefully I'll be reading that one soon because that one has the angst and the tension up to another level. The next one that I read is The Empress of Salt and Fortune. This is my second Mevo. I was not in love with this. I think it was a solid story, but honestly I don't really remember any of it. I remember there's a character named Rabbit, and I know that there's an empress, but yeah, that is pretty much all I remember about this book because it wasn't really that memorable for me, which isn't to say that it's a bad book, but yeah, I don't really remember this story. I feel like the next one is probably going to be more memorable, and I feel like they're more companion novels, so I will probably read the next one. But so far my track record with Nevo has not been the best. I think that they are a great writer in terms of the craft, but in terms of like a story that I am invested in, I have yet to see that from this author. And the last book that I have to talk about is Merciful by Kimberly Lemming. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. It's just like I liked the first one that I talked about, and I really enjoyed the story in this one. Alexis is hilarious, and I just really liked how she had no filter. I thought the main character was fine. I thought the love interest was fine. This is a novella, so I wasn't really like connected to them at all. The steamy scenes were fine as well, but honestly what made me love this book was the sword Alexis. But that wraps up all 21 books that I have read for the month of June. If you like this video, please like and comment any of your thoughts on any of the books that I shared. And if you don't want to do that, you can always just leave a sword for Alexis from Merciful. But I thank you all for watching, and I will see you in my next video.